If I was Tim Cook, I would be saying I told you so. My name is Steve Smith, this is TQA Weekly, and let's talk about Firefox's patch, Rule 41, war on privacy, as well as being called a criminal for using anonymizing tools. Firefox recently announced, and by the way, patched a recent flaw, make sure you update your Firefox client, that exposed every Tor user using a Windows machine to the possibility of being unmasked and de-anonymized over the internet in what is only possibly something injected by the FBI or some other third-party police agency or group that had access to the code because, guess what? It aligns almost perfectly with the FBI's tactics of de-anonymizing and unmasking users on the Tor network, which is something they were already apparently able to do. So that requires some serious intel sharing somewhere in the background. Just make sure you updated your Firefox client at the same time. But at the same time, we have a few different things going on in the United States. If you think you're living in a perfect world, you're dreaming in Technicolor. First of all, they are now trying to equate people who use VPNs, use Tor and anonymizing tools, such as proxies, obviously, and all that shebang, by the way, to being a criminal. Why? Because then they get to raise their numbers of wolves that they scream about all the time, even though there are not any wolves to be seen whatsoever. And then they're trying to push out things like Rule 41, which would allow American magistrate judges the ability to issue warrants for the FBI that don't include jurisdictional restrictions, which is something that is supposed to be attached to a warrant. So that basically, let's say somebody tried to serve a warrant to you, to your address, that would be fine. They wouldn't be able to search your neighbor's house. But what they want to be able to do is they connect to the computer and they connect to everything connected, meaning that they can connect to cell phones, tablets, laptops, computers, servers that connected to everything, but are not necessarily involved, and then collect evidence that can be used against people that don't have a jurisdictional clause attached to it that will more than likely pass in courts. If that's not bullying and God mode on warrants, I don't know what is. But if I were American, I'd be fighting that right now. And furthermore, there's even an arms race against this kind of stuff because people like me and other developers are going out of their way to make fully encrypted websites that also use encrypted communications, because literally browsers call you out if you don't use encrypted communications like TLS. So what ends up happening is now that companies are moving to these hardened data security practices, governments are bitching because they have a so-called blind spot, which they never had, by the way. That's just a ruse to get you to be paranoid. One of those many crazy ways of crying wolf. And they want holes to be punched in security, have access without warrants to database information as such. And all of this literally comes down to weakening the code just enough that if anybody ever got wind of how that database works and hacked it, the government, who will never back the company, that company, when it gets sued, may or may not go out of business. To which you got to think about this for a minute. Governments want companies to do things but are not willing to back them either at the same time, not willing to flip the cost of development and storage of information at the same time, pointing straight at Justin Trudeau and C-51 right now. And I don't see where this is going, because there's going to be a wall in which developers will simply tell off the governments of the world. We are going to be moving towards a world in which encryption is important. We have seen it with all those DDoS attacks, where all of those Internet of Things devices started DOSing all over the place. If you want a good reason why encryption is important, I will give you one that prevents the wolf from peeping on anybody. If you are afraid of pedophiles, the last thing you want is an unlocked cell phone grid allowing any pedophile the ability to spot every kid within 100 kilometers and being able to kidnap them. Encryption itself prevents them from being seen. In this case, this is the same tactic the governments will use on you, only in reverse. We use encryption to protect our personal information. They don't want that. And they could very easily, in many cases, ask a company for said precise information with something called a warrant that would not necessarily allow for holes to be built into the code that can be exploited, but allow them to prosecute the right people correctly. I want your comments, your questions, and your suggestions for other ways of doing that kind of stuff down below. Now, if you liked this episode, liked it, dislike it if you didn't, share with those that you think can benefit from this, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions for topics for me, ask at tqaweekly.com is my email, or go to tqaweekly.com for everything else. And if you want to make this show better, go to patreon.com/tqaweekly and become a patron today. Patrons get these episodes 24 hours in advance of everyone else. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.